have in the chat box, and we will answer these at the end of the session. Without further delay, I'm excited to hand over to Magda, who's going to tell us about impactful teaching with ESAP in the new normal. Thank you, Magda. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to you from Poland. I'm Magda Kania, and I live in Eastern Europe. I can see that some people from my area, let's say, are taking part in this webinar today. But hello to everyone. Like Charlie said, I'm going to talk about impactful teaching with ESAP in the new normal. Due to coronavirus pandemics, we all had to, in a way, redefine the word normal. What was normal is not normal anymore. So we had to find a way to kind of adapt to the situation. And I follow social media, and there is one thing that really surprised me, that people are very creative, and as long as they have passion for what they do, they can still function, let's say, normally still. So basically, what I will try to do today, I will try and share some of my passion for teaching, and hopefully some of my creativity, and I will show you how to design impactful lessons. So, like I said, we are all different. Everybody, some people had undergone serious changes, some only had to make small adaptations. But when it comes to hello, Kinga from Poland. Nice to see you. When it comes to describing people, I have this tendency to put them into two categories. There's one category, you can see it on the left, and I decided to present it to you using my son's computer screen. So as you can see, it's pretty chaotic. He claims to be a very creative person, artistic, but for me it's simply, a mess, chaos. As a contrast, on the right, you can see the screenshot of my computer's screen. And probably you have already guessed that I'm a very well-organized person. I like to have, folders, and these folders, I have subfolders, and these subfolders, I have different files, and so on and so on. I always have a system, and I feel comfortable with that. But in March 2020, my life looked more or less like my son's screen. It was a total mess. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I had to find solutions to all the coming situations and problems. So I had a lot of decisions to make, like what will be my workplace? How should I communicate with my students? And not only with my students, but also with my teachers, because I'm a teacher trainer, but I also am the owner of a private language school. So, there was a lot of things to think. There were a lot of things to think about, to consider, and a lot of decisions to make. I didn't know how to prepare my lessons. Not to mention healthy routine. Whenever I opened Facebook and I saw these posts of people enjoying the free time, reading. Oops. Okay, I'm back. I disappeared for a moment. Can you hear me? I don't know what happened. Yes, okay, sorry. Something blinked here. Okay, so like I said about Facebook, yes, I was so angry when I saw these people enjoying their time, reading books, going for a walk with their dogs. And whenever I looked at that, I thought, gee, what's the problem? Like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have time for that? I had absolutely no time for myself, and it was devastating. I really suffered a lot at that time. But maybe a week later, when it all started, when the government announced the lockdown, I think a week or 2 weeks later, when I was a mess and I was overwhelmed, I decided to stop and think. And then I reminded myself of the words that my dad used to say. And whenever I had a problem, he said, Magda, when you don't know what to do, you should start with what you do know. And that was fantastic, you know, because I decided to think in a different way. I decided to make a plan. Okay, so I think this is the only thing to function, to be efficient, and to enjoy what you do. Simply to have a plan for everything, for your life, for your work, and for your lessons. So, as you probably can guess, in September, my state of mind looked more or less like my screen. So as you see, Magda was back, and I decided to start the new school year on a high note, in a different state of mind. I was prepared, and I really enjoyed the coming time. I realized that I can work anywhere. I can work online, I can work face-to-face, I can work from home, I can work from school. It doesn't matter, because I came up with the idea how to design my lessons so that they are impactful and effective in any teaching environment. Communication with my students and with my teachers, well, we found a way. Yes, we found one channel of communication which we all felt comfortable with, and it kind of solved the problem. Materials, I will show you in a moment what about materials and preparation, because this is the main topic of this session. And finally, I have found some time to have some time for myself. I now can enjoy my morning coffee, which I actually love, and I can't start the day without it. So when I talk about materials, I hope that these of you who work with Pearson course books already know about Pearson English Portal. This is the portal where we have all the materials we need. Everything is digital. All the course books, all the teacher's book, with audio, with video, everything. All the stuff we need to run our lessons is simply online on this platform. So I don't need to worry about not having my paper course book, because I have everything right there. And once you have an account on Pearson English Portal, you get access to all the materials you work with. For example, these are the examples of the books that I work with. Yes, like Focus, Gold Experience, and so on. And right there, I get access to the presentation tool, which is the interactive whiteboard software, which I use also when I work online. We also have access to my English Lab, which is an online practice for students, and a lot of other things. When it comes to preparing my lessons, I incorporated into my teaching Online Teaching Methodology ESAP. This is the framework according to which I design my lessons so that there are 4 steps, 4 stages of the lesson. Okay, like engage, study, activate, and practice. And so the whole thing I have to do when I prepare my lesson, I have to think about just 4 elements I'm going to incorporate into my lesson. So let's start with the stages and short description, and I will show you some of the ideas, some of the activities I use at different stages. So the first one is called engage, because what we want to do when we start a lesson, we want to engage our students into the lesson. We want to make sure that they don't go somewhere else. They don't go checking Facebook or, I don't know, scrolling through any other social media, or we don't want them to chat with friends. We want them to be with us in this lesson, and we want them, well, I want them to want to stay with me. That's why I start the lesson with an engaging activity. Normally we call it a warm-up, but I like to use the word an appetizer, because, you know, I want to whet my students' appetite for more. I want to make sure that they are really into this lesson. So at this stage, it has to be something engaging, something that will catch catch them and you know, grab them and catch their attention. I also try to activate prior knowledge. I need to make sure that they, whatever they know on the subject that we are going to cover, and I also incorporate retrieval practice. I make sure that the students, we have some kind of a revision. I like to have some kind of a brain gym at the beginning, and very often I use the common error report from my English lab. I will talk about it more a bit later, but I use the information from this report, the information in which I show what my students are still struggling with. So I try to incorporate it into this first stage of my lesson. So what can we do here? For example, you know, if you have an account on Instagram, there is this fantastic site, the Happy Broadcast. This is a bunch of people who decided that in the world filled with negativity, they want to spread some love and positivity. And they post quite a lot of information on different things around the world, but this is mostly positive. This is good news. This is something we want to hear and something we don't normally hear when we watch the news. So here you will find posts about any topic you want. There are, I don't remember, hundreds of thousands of different posts on different topics, like something about travel, about animals, about nature, about I don't know, culture, countries. There is a lot of stuff there, and I think it's a good start to the lesson because it is something good, and we all need it, especially now. Our students need it. And we can start by a kind of a discussion, yes, like checking if the students really know. Then maybe we can ask them to dive into the topic and search something on that. I think it's a good start. So I do it quite often. I use the Happy Broadcast. I truly recommend it. Sometimes it's difficult to engage students in your lesson when you know that you're going to work on grammar. So at that point, I very often use memes, which actually I love, and very often I take screenshots of the memes I see online, and I use them on my lesson. So you see, what's the difference between starting the lesson with, guys, hello, today we're going to talk about past continuous and past simple, and starting a lesson with a meme like this one about the ostrich. Yes, how fast was the ostrich running when it hit the tree? It's humorous, it's funny, and my students really love it because at that moment, they don't think about grammar, they think about the picture, about the situation. And we of course start talking about the picture and thinking what is the background, what was before, what was after, and so on. And as you can see, the grammar naturally comes here, but my students are engaged because it's not about grammar, it's about an ostrich in this case. Sometimes I use a technique I called reversed goals. So we all know that when we start a lesson, we should inform our students about the topic of the lesson and the learning objectives. But sometimes I do it in a different way. I don't tell them what the topic of the lesson is. I make them guess. So I have a lesson in mind, and the topic of the lesson is something. So I write 10 questions about this something. It's usually an object, a thing, something. So I would like now you to try and guess what was the topic of this lesson. I gave you only 4 questions, but I think you can guess. Can you write what do you think is the topic of this lesson? If you could write in the chat box, that would be great. Sorry. Umbrella, interesting. Weather, bread, raincoat, an article of clothing, a cat, inventions, haircuts. Okay, weather, hairstyles. Okay, why hairstyles? Igloo. Oh, okay. Shelter. Fantastic. Okay, actually, we have quite a lot of ideas. Actually, the topic of this lesson was the house. But I hope that you see my point here. You see, you gave me a lot of different answers. Yes, you were trying to guess. There's a lot of guessing, thinking, analyzing, and so on. And I think it's a brilliant start of the lesson. Yes, to make our students think and get involved in the activity, in the guessing process, in like this step of the lesson. So it's very simple. All you have to do is just write 10 questions about the topic and make your students guess. Of course, I use these questions again by the end of the lesson. And very often, if we have some new vocabulary, so by the end of the lesson, I ask my students to answer these questions again, but I make them, I make sure that they use the newly acquired vocabulary. So, I kind of recycle my work. Yes, I created 10 questions, so I don't want to use them only at the beginning of the lesson. So I come back to that by the end. We also have in a way, we can check if we reached the learning objectives of the lesson. It's very simple, but I think you can definitely use it. Okay, another idea to engage our students is again very simple. I start my lesson with this part of our lesson is sponsored by the letters W, S, and E, and the number 4. And now again, a question to you. Does it ring a bell? Does anybody recognize the sentence? People my age might recognize it. Sesame Street, of course. Okay, it sounds like Sesame Street. It is from Sesame Street, but I like to have some fun, and I like to have fun on my lessons with my students. If I am bored with my lessons, how are my students supposed to be interested in it? So, bringing fun into the lesson is for me is the one of the best options. So sometimes I even show them the pictures of Sesame Street and so on. By the way, who was your favorite character in Sesame Street? Some of you recognized it. For me, it was Cookie Monster. I love the Cookie Monster. Zoe, Ernie. Okay. So you definitely know Sesame Street. Okay, so the idea here is that I start the lesson with this part of the lesson is sponsored by letters W, S, and E, and the number 4. And I ask my students to the don't count, I think it was. Yeah, Marie. Okay, and I ask my students to write down 4 words that start with each of the letters. So 4 words that start with W, 4 words that start with S, and with E. I like this type of activity because I work with quite differentiated groups. So I have in one group I have some ambitious students, high achievers, but sometimes there are students who still struggle with something. And this kind of activity gives all of them a chance to show something, to kind of prove that they really know something. So as you can guess, the more ambitious students, of course, will give you examples of more advanced words. And the lower level students, let's say, of course, might write something not so ambitious, let's say, or maybe something they remember not from the previous lessons, but something that they have learned, something they learned a very long time ago. But that's okay. I don't criticize that. I simply check the correctness of the words. Yes, and I'm happy that they search their brains and try to retrieve something, try to bring something into our lesson. And the last idea for the engaging stage is what I call challenging questions. Especially when I work with more advanced students, I do an exercise like that. I take some of the words that I want to start my lesson with, but I put them together in an unobvious way. Like, for example, can you soup up the soup? Do you know the meaning of the word soup up? Anybody? Do you know the meaning of the word soup up? It's used in context of vehicles. Soup up a car means to make it more powerful. So as you see, we normally don't use the word soup up when we talk about food. And that's why I put the words together here. Can you soup up the soup? Because I want to kind of provoke my students to think beyond the obvious, yes, to come up with something more creative, some crazy ideas. Like, for example, can you find food for thought in a supermarket? Pimp my soup, exactly. Can you find food for thought in a supermarket? Guys, can you write in the chat box? Is it possible to find food for thought in a supermarket? Sure. Can you give me an example? Maybe. Dennis is not sure. I think definitely, yeah. Books, okay, but that's very literal, you know. Can you go deeper? Can you zero GMO something? Okay, but I lost it. Zero GMO doesn't mean zero. Okay. So much variety of food unnecessary. Okay, that's my point, and that's what my students come up with usually. Yes, they create some crazy but some pretty serious, ideas, and they share it with the group. It's a nice start of a lesson. It's a great conversation. I like provoking my students, and I like making them think simply, as simple as that. So challenging questions, simply take some of the words you want to work on and put them into questions in an unobvious way, let's say. Okay, the next stage of the ESAP framework is study. So basically, this stage is the part of the lesson in which we simply introduce new language. So at that moment, and it doesn't matter if I work online or face-to-face, because, okay, let me stop here for a moment. There, a few days ago, I listened to a fantastic podcast by Angela Watson. It's Angela Watson, Truth for Teachers. Actually, Agnieszka Cyluk from Pearson, Poland, my dear friend, she recommended to me, and it's absolutely brilliant. And Angela Watson mentioned something like resilient pedagogy. And she described a concept in which we should design our lessons in such a way that they are resistant to change. So it doesn't matter in what environment you teach. Is it online or face-to-face? You should design your lessons and design your tasks in such a way that they are equally effective. Yeah, okay, I will write in the chat box the name of the podcast. It is Angela Watson, Truth for Teachers. It's absolutely brilliant. You just have to listen to it. Truth for Teachers. Yeah, I think it's this one. Okay. So she mentioned this flexible pedagogy. Yes, we should make sure that when I design my lesson, I make sure that I can do it online or face-to-face. It doesn't matter, okay? Just I have some stages of my lesson and some elements that I can do in any environment. So at this stage, the study stage, we introduce new language, and I use presentation tool. Presentation tool is the part of the Pearson English portal. If you teach face-to-face, you can use it. If you teach online, you can also use it. At that point, you simply have to share your screen with your students. I will show you in a moment. But what I want you to remember at this stage, study stage, that we should vary the type of activities and the pace of the lesson. I always make sure that there is a balance between what I call heads up and heads down activities. Okay, so there is a balance between activities in which my students are actually producing something or answering the questions, and the activities in which they work individually, working on the exercises. My students have their own books, so it is easier for me, even if I work online, because they have their course books with themselves. Okay, at this stage, I try to keep my students active. I nominate them to answer the questions. I keep checking if they are working, if they are still with me. I monitor the lesson and what my students do at that time, all the time. Give students enough time to think. This is incredibly important. If we don't have time to reflect, to analyze what we want to say, whatever we produce is sometimes okay, but it doesn't stay with us for longer. So make sure that you give your students time to think. And of course, give them enough time to practice. So this stage of the lesson is, when I design a lesson, is the slowest part of the lesson, because here we focus on the new language and new material. So this part, of course, is the moment when I, can you see my slide? I can't see my slide. When I squeeze the juice out of the course book. Yes, if we work with a course book, of course, there's a lot of things to work on. We don't have to design our own lessons from scratch. So I simply use the course book that we work with. And here, like I mentioned before, Pearson English Portal is the portal where you have access to all the materials in a digital version online, so you don't need to carry anything with you. So at that stage, I simply open the presentation tool and I go to page view so that my students can see where we are exactly, what page we're working on exactly. And I simply work with the new material. I introduce the language and we practice and we go through some of the exercises. As you can see, this is the page view, but next to the tasks, next to the instructions, there are these yellow stars. I think they are stars. And once you click on the star, you can see this task, this exercise on full screen. So your students can see only the exercise you're working on. And at that stage, I make sure my students work individually, but then I check the answers with them. I simply show them the answers to make sure that everybody knows where we are and what we do, and if this is correct or not, or they should maybe work on something more. Of course, there you have all the audio and the video. It is kind of accessible from from this presentation tool. You don't need any extra stuff here. Like I said, audio, you simply click the play button and your students can listen to the audio, and the same is with the video. Actually, you can watch the lesson. Michael Brandt recorded a lesson with a bunch of the teenagers from Spain, I think, and he recorded a lesson in which he presents the ESAP kind of in practice, and you can watch it on Pearson.com, I think. And he also presents the way you can use the presentation tool on your lesson, because you can see absolutely his every move. So it's I think it's a great thing for you to watch. And like I mentioned before about the time, you know, John Hattie in his book Visible Learning for Teachers said something that at first shocked me. He said that students are given on average 1 second or less to think, consider their ideas, and respond. Can you imagine 1 second if try to do it to yourself. Yeah, if somebody asks you a question and then doesn't even wait a second for you to answer, but immediately answers himself or herself, there's no point here. Like there's no learning and no, nothing impactful in it. So our students definitely need more time to think and consider their ideas. I was shocked when I read that, and especially with the fact that we as teachers tend to give more time to the students that we consider as brighter students, which is pointless. Yes, they don't need that much time. The students who still struggle need definitely more time. So whenever I ask a question, or ask my students to produce something, I try to do something like that. I stop and I count in my head to 10. I think you should all try it. It's strange when you sit and you count to 10. I will not do it now because we don't have time. But for me, it seemed like, I don't know, a year. Like, really, I have to wait that long for them to answer. But actually, when I started waiting for the answers, when I stopped giving the answers myself, it turned out that my students worked much better. So give them time and don't worry about the moments of silence on your lessons. So time is something I make sure my students get at this stage of the lesson. And I also use a lot of peer teaching. I have this system when students, when we are working on some material, some content, and students ask me a question like, teacher, how should I say something? I always say, ask 3 before me. Okay, ask 3 friends before you ask me. I think it is much better for my students, not only in terms of learning and teaching, but also in terms of remaining a community. Yes, when we work online, it is difficult and it is not easy to keep the relationship in a good way, So I make sure that my students have a lot of chances to talk to each other, to one another during my lessons. Actually, John Hattie, in the book I mentioned before, also mentioned something really interesting, that our students, in terms of feedback, our students value the peers' feedback much more than the teacher's feedback. I was surprised, but it is, because sometimes they think that we teachers give them feedback like, okay, great, fantastic, well done, good job. They simply dismiss it because for them it's so obvious. Teachers do this all the time. So maybe this is the idea behind it, why students appreciate peers' feedback more. So that's just food for thought for you. Okay, and now let's move to the activate stage. This is the third stage of my lesson, and this is the part in which I make sure that students produce a language. This is free language production, right? I make sure that the tasks are personalized, that my students can somehow use the knowledge, use the newly acquired skills, and make it their own. So I make them create their own tasks and materials, but also I make sure that they talk about themselves in terms of the language we introduced during the lesson. So this is the part of the lesson when I use pair and group work a lot. I work via Zoom, so I use breakout rooms, and my students have tasks that they have to do together in the breakout rooms. Of course, I visit them from time to time, and I think this is a good way for them to keep communicating with their peers. So this part of the lesson is for me The most interesting, to tell you the truth, because right here we talk about something that we covered during the lesson, but also students add something more to that. And this is also a part in which I kind of try to use my creativity as much as possible. If anybody of you works with Gold Experience, there is a brilliant lesson on identity box. And I love this lesson. It's on B1 level, I think. Identity box, which is about the boxes in which we could put some of the things, some of the stuff that we have that could describe our personality, our life, our surroundings, our family, anything that is important to us. And of course, the course book authors, when they write the course books, they have fantastic ideas, and using the course book is quite often enough if you go task by task. But sometimes, like here, they didn't expect that one day students will not be able to work from like in the classroom, in face-to-face. So the last task here, Speak Up, was plan your identity box, work in pairs, and discuss the things with your friends. But right now, I have this tendency to look for advantages and to look at the positive aspects. I thought this is brilliant that we are working online, because actually I can do it without planning. So what I did, I asked my students to look around. Don't plan, simply do that. Look around and take one of the objects, just one to start with. Take one of the objects that is somewhere near you that you think you could put into your identity box. And as you can see, my students took some pretty obvious stuff, but they had quite nice stories behind that. Like one guy chose the scissors because he wants to be a, what do you think? Who does he want to be? Any ideas? A hairdresser, of course. Yeah. So it's possible that if we were in the classroom, if we were working face to face in in a kind of normal environment, he might have these scissors with him, but you never know. Here it was just pretty easy, because you simply looked around and they gathered some of the fantastic things. So what I'm trying to say, we can use the fact that our students work from home and they can do different things. They can bring different things that they would normally not have in the classroom. Okay, at this stage, at the activate stage, I make my students write a lot. But as you can see, describe yourself in 3 words: lazy. That's a typical thing my students would say or write. My students very often are economical with words. They know the structures, they know the phrases, they know the forms, they know how to write, but quite often they don't know what to write about. So at this point, I sometimes bring some games that I have and I love, like, for example, Dixit. I don't know if you know this game. It doesn't have to be Dixit. If you know Dixit, perfect. If you don't know, you can use any visuals. The idea is for me to bring pictures that are in a way ambiguous. Yes, I want to stir their imagination. I want to give them kind of prompts to think about before when they write. And in this case, we had a lesson on phrasal verbs. We focused on phrasal verbs, and at the activate stage of the lesson, I asked my students to come up with a story in which they will use as many phrasal verbs from the lesson as possible. Of course, without the pictures, they would come up with something, but using Dixit was fantastic because my students created incredibly imaginative, brilliant, interesting stories. So I think you can definitely try it. And the last idea for this stage is what I call the circle of friends. The circle of friends, because I work with 5 words at this stage, at this activity. And here we talked about personality adjectives, and I picked 5 adjectives from the lesson, and I asked my students to imagine that each of the adjectives represents one person. Like somebody is sociable, somebody is crazy, somebody is reliable, and so on. And I ask my students to work in groups and discuss and decide whether these 5 people could create a nice bunch of friends. Yeah, could they be a group of friends or not, and why? And there was, a very interesting discussion here that my students were really engaged in, and was a fantastic stage, as activate stage, because we activated the language that we worked on during the lesson. And the last part, the last stage, of course, is practice. Which basically is homework, but I don't like, and my students don't like the word homework, so we use just individual practice. And here I use interactive online exercises, which is My English Lab. Yes, my students have access to that. They need a special code. And they simply do the exercises online. And this Mel, My English Lab, is the teacher's best friend. Okay, this Mel is the part of my teaching which gave me the me time. Yes, because now I don't have to go through the homework and check and mark and do things like that, because the system does it for me. Yes, the exercises are scored automatically, and students get feedback, instant feedback, when they do the exercises. And we as teachers, we can monitor their performance, and what we get by the end is the common error report. So once you click on the task, one of the tasks that your students were supposed to do, you get the common error report, in which you can see just the parts of the task that your students still struggle with. And the information from this common report is the information I use to design my next lesson, and I try to incorporate elements that my students still struggle with into the engage lesson of my next lesson. Okay, so now I hope you found some of my ideas useful, and I hope that I helped you with lesson designing ideas. I can show you here. I printed it especially for you. When I plan my lessons, it looks more or less like that. I simply have a chart in which I have the stages of my lesson, and I simply use one activity for engage. Then I decide on the exercises from the course book we're going to do on the study stage, during study stage, and then I decide what we're going to do on the activate stage and what will be the practice, the homework, and that's it. It takes me like 10 minutes, which I absolutely love, and I have time for reading, coffee, and my passion is still with me. And I want you to remember that passion may be the only natural renewable resource that we have. So take care of yourselves. Don't overwork. Stay happy, stay positive, and thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magda. That was inspiring and very informative session. As you could see, the comments reflect that. I've been asking about Mel and how they can access it. And Mel is an additional tool that comes with the titles and the courses that we publish here at Pearson. I've just copied into the chat box a link to our Pearson English catalogue page. So if you navigate through that page, you can find out how you can access Mel, with which titles. The best route is to speak to your local rep, your local ELT consultant, who can advise you on what course is best for your needs. So Magda, we haven't had a vast amount of questions. You've answered them as we've gone along, actually, but there are a couple hanging there. And one of them is sort of a point, but also perhaps you could give your response on it, and that's prompts. Prompts should be provided for effective practice, right? I'm not sure your presentation that was relevant, but I presume perhaps in some speaking exercises.
Okay, yeah, prompts. Was it about the visual prompts, about the game? Because I'm not sure I get it. Whenever we have a speaking exercise, I give my students prompts, but it depends what kind of students you work with. Yes, if you have a bunch of very open-minded and creative students who are not afraid to speak, like, pretty often they don't need any prompts. If you want to drill something, I think prompts are brilliant. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's what the person was asking about.
I think that probably covers it, but also then you bring in sort of the second question there that we've got, and it's about student motivation. So I teach academic English high-level students, and they don't want to talk. Please help. How can we motivate even adult learners to be more comfortable and speak out?
The first thing I do, I try to find out, like, what's the problem, or maybe what the students are really interested in, and because sometimes the course books offer topics that our students don't find interesting. So maybe, well, I ask them, so what would you like to talk about? Maybe that's the point. Maybe ask them what topics they would find interesting, and start with that. I think. Well, whenever I have students who don't want to speak, I always try to take small steps. Start with something easy, and then I simply add something more and more and more. I think basically this is it. But mostly, like, ask them what they would like to talk about. I think that it could help.
Absolutely, no. Well, that's very valuable, and actually, a couple of our other sessions that we've delivered this week and last week as part of the Ready for webinar series have been addressing these issues of student motivation and how to make your students more comfortable to engage in the process. So I've just shared the link to the schedule. So have a look through that schedule, find the relevant sessions, and you can then go to our YouTube playlist, which I've also just shared the URL to catch up and to watch that session. A more finite question just come in. Can this ESAP approach be applicable in very technical courses, such as, for example, an accounting course? Are there any limitations with using this ESAP approach in very technical courses?
Okay, I'm losing your sound sometimes, but can it be? Could you reply? Could you repeat again? Sorry.
Can you use the ESAP approach in technical courses like accounting?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Well, ESAP is just the framework to design the lesson, which is impactful because you take certain steps. It's like you always have to start. It doesn't matter what's the content of the lesson. Yes, it can be. I use ESAP when I teach online and when I teach face-to-face, when I teach adults, and when I teach business English. It doesn't matter. Okay, it's about the framework of the designing of the lesson and not the content. So I think absolutely you can do it. You just have to analyze the content of the lesson and start with something engaging. Then you simply go to studying the new language, and then you simply try to activate or the content of the lesson to make sure that your students can really produce something. So I think absolutely yes.
Brilliant. Thank you for that response, Magda.
Okay.
Well, all that we have time for. So thank you again, Magda.
Yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can drop me a line. Here's my email, so I'm I'm ready to reply, to answer. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And thank you to all of you attendees for joining us in this session today. Just a quick note that certificates will be sent out to the email address that you registered for the session with. The recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And in the follow-up email, look out for links to the virtual goodie bag and also the guidelines for teaching ESAP, which is included in the follow-up email. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope to see you at another Pearson English webinar very soon. Goodbye.